Littlefield come to share the Word of God with us. I look back and remember when I was a young preacher. And Pastor would give me an invitation to preach on Sunday night or Wednesday night. And always loved the opportunity to share the Word of God and grow in my ability to preach, Wes, and see God doing a work in your life. And it's really encouraging. See what the Holy Spirit's doing as you're surrendering and submitting to Him. Just invite you to pray for Him. Our world needs more young preachers. Amen. Brother Wes, when you come tonight, bless the Lord as He comes to share the Word of God with us.
Can you hear me? We good? All right. Well, like Pastor said, I'm Wesley Littlefield. For most of you should know me or do know me. I've gone to OAG now for 8 years probably, or somewhere about that. I just want to take time to thank Pastor and you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak. You know, it means a whole lot to me, especially trying to get into ministry and just trying to learn this art that we call preaching. But tonight, I believe that God has given me a word for our church for this time. And I believe that you're here for a specific reason. And I pray that you find that reason tonight. I've been praying ever since I started working on this message that there starts a movement in our church that doesn't draw people in. You know, today it seems like we're so consumed with drawing people into our churches, but it actually does what we're biblically supposed to do and sends us out and draws people closer to Jesus that way.
Amen. Amen.
But before we get into my message, I need a volunteer. I'm going to pick on my grandpa because I grew up getting picked on. So. All right, I've got this flashlight. And we're going to say this battery represents faith. I need you to get this flashlight to work on faith. Good luck. Maybe your faith isn't strong enough. Maybe you need a little stronger faith. Is that it?
Got another battery?
Oh, you need another battery? Okay, well, I've got another battery that represents actions. So maybe you're just not trying hard enough. So,
Is that what it is? Okay.
so you're not trying hard enough
Not
still?
tried hard enough, Wes.
Okay. So maybe you need both
I
batteries.
think you need both batteries.
You need faith and
You need
actions.
faith in it. I agree with you. We're gonna make this work in.
No, you didn't make it work.
Hurry.
It takes both. As he goes and sits down, turn to your neighbor and tell them it takes both. All right, we're going to stand to honor the holy word of God tonight. And we're going to read from Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 29. Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 29. And this is Jesus speaking. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. God, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak your words tonight. I pray that I'm your mouthpiece, God, that I don't say anything that doesn't need to be said, but that I say everything that you have prepared for tonight. Father, thank you so much for gathering us all here tonight.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you guys once again to pray for not only me, but to pray that your hearts and minds would be receptive to this message as well.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for this opportunity. We ask you to bless Wesley, Lord Jesus. Wisdom, understanding, increase his knowledge in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you, guys. You can be seated. What if we united our faith and our actions? How would our world look? Would the choices that we make on a daily basis change? Would the people around us see a difference in our lives? In the Old Testament, there was a man named Moses, and he demonstrated the act of unifying his faith and his actions. And tonight we're going to take a peek into his life to see just how this unity worked out. And we're also going to see the consequences of misaligning our faith and our actions. Moses was the man that God chose to lead the Israelites out of slavery from Egypt. Knowing that the Israelites were not ready to enter the promised land immediately after leaving Egypt, God had Moses lead them around the long way. And immediately on this journey, the Israelites began to complain. They complained that there was an army chasing them and there was a sea, and they were stuck in between the middle. So, like any normal person, I think I would be complaining in that moment too. So Moses went to God, and God told Moses what to do. Moses held out his hand over the sea with the staff, and God drove back the waters. God used Moses to split the sea so the Israelites could walk through on dry ground. And when the Egyptians tried to chase them, the water swallowed up the Egyptians. Then the Israelites, after that, complained about not having enough food. So Moses went to God, and God sent manna and quail. Then the Israelites complained that they didn't have any water. I eat all this bread and quail, and now I'm a little bit thirsty, and my livestock's thirsty. So Moses went to God, and God told Moses what to do. Moses struck a rock and outpoured water. Every time that the Israelites complained, Moses went to God.
Amen.
When something went wrong, Moses went to God. When things were going right, Moses went to God.
Amen.
He met with God regularly. Moses developed a relationship with God. This is how that he knew God's will.
Amen.
Moses unified his faith and actions by having a dynamic relationship with Yahweh, the creator of the universe. Just like Moses needed to know God in order to know his will, we need to know God.
Amen.
It's what we were created for.
That's right.
We must experience that dynamic relationship with God.
Amen.
Jesus was clear in our passage tonight, and honestly, he was what most would consider harsh. He wasn't just like, hey, y'all tried really hard, and so here's your participation trophy. Come on into heaven. You can party with me and my dad. He didn't say that at all. Clearly, Jesus is saying that doing good isn't enough.
Amen.
Right.
It's not enough. Just being good is not enough to enter the kingdom of heaven. However, he didn't just say, you guys tried really hard, but you're not good enough, so I'm out of here. Me and my dad are going to go hang out. You guys are just out of luck. That's not what he said either. He gave us a way to enter the kingdom of heaven, and that way was very simple, by knowing him.
Amen.
Not just knowing stories about him, not just coming to church and listening to the pastor preach a message, and not just going to Sunday school and hearing all the stories in the Bible, but actually knowing God.
Amen.
John 17:3 confirms this.
Yeah.
Now this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent.
Amen.
When we know God, when we have a dynamic relationship with him, we actually want to hear his word. And then we want to go out and do his will.
Amen.
We don't act to gain his approval, like so many people believe. But because we are approved by God, we want to act accordingly.
Amen.
Now, C.S. Lewis put it this way in his book, Mere Christianity, And a total off-the-topic side note, read every book by C.S. Lewis, especially Mere Christianity. He's my favorite author and just awesome. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity. Handing everything over to Christ does not, of course, mean that you stop trying. To trust Him means, of course, trying to do all that He says. There would be no sense in saying you trusted a person if you would not take his advice.
Amen.
Thus, if you have really handed yourself over to Him, it must follow that you are trying to obey Him, but trying in a new way, a less worried way. Not doing these things in order to be saved, but because He has begun to save you already.
Hallelujah. Amen.
Not hoping to get to heaven as a reward for your actions, but inevitably wanting to act in a certain way because a first faint gleam of heaven is already inside you.
Amen.
Christians have often disputed as to whether what leads the Christian home is good actions or faith in Christ. I have no right really to speak on such a difficult question, but it does seem to me like asking which blade in a pair of scissors is most necessary.
Yeah.
Remind your neighbor, it takes both.
Amen.
It takes both blades for a pair of scissors to function properly.
That's right.
Just like it takes both our faith and our actions unified
Amen.
to live a life built on Jesus. Our aim is to be the wise man in the story that Jesus told, right? The wise man who built his house on a solid foundation. Now, I've never actually built a house, but I've watched it, and to me it seems like they want to start on a solid foundation. Oftentimes that requires digging down to a solid foundation. And for those of you that don't know, I work at a coal mine, and we have lots of heavy equipment that makes digging and moving a lot of dirt really easy. But back in Jesus' day, it wasn't that easy. They had a shovel. And that's about it. Maybe a hoe or a pick, and that's about it. Now, growing up, I loved playing with my dad's shovels and playing in the dirt and getting muddy and, getting sprayed down with the water hose at the back door. And so, when I was 6 years old, about 6 years old, I got the greatest idea ever given to a 6-year-old. No, I'm serious. I was going to dig a tunnel from my parents' house to my grandparents' house. Now, isn't that great? I mean, come on. What does a 6-year-old need? A tunnel from his parents' house to his grandparents' house. The problem was it was a quarter-mile away. So, there was a little bit there, but I was 6. I had the world by the tail. So like any sensible 6-year-old, I grabbed a shovel and I started digging. And I dug and dug and dug some more. Started sweating. I got tired. Finally went inside and sat there and was like, man, I need to recruit some help. So next time at school, I invited one of my buddies over, and that next weekend he came over and we both dug and dug and dug and dug some more. Knowing that we had to be halfway to China by then, we jumped into that hole to measure how deep it was. And the bottom was way too soon because it came up to about our 6-year-old knees. And right about that time, an imaginary army walked up and started invading my yard. So it just so happened that that was the perfect depth for a foxhole for a couple of 6-year-olds. And that was the end of our digging adventure. And honestly, he went home, and I went in and got washed up, and I kind of forgot about the hole. Until one day, after a really heavy rain, I hear these screaming and crying. I'm like, what is going on? And then I turned the corner, and my little brother had just fallen in or jumped in or something into the hole that filled up after a big rain. So my mission wasn't totally a failure. I got a good laugh at my little brother. But hopefully you understand that digging is a laborious task. It requires a lot of labor, even for a couple of 6-year-olds that seem to have endless energy. It's not easy to get down to a solid foundation. And I believe that's what Jesus was telling us in this passage. Once we have begun our relationship with Jesus, it doesn't get any easier. Life is not going to be easy. Being a Christian doesn't mean that life is all rainbows and unicorns.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if we want to be like the wise man, and we do, right, church?
Right.
Then it will take work on our end.
That's right.
Sweaty, dirty, W-O-R-K work. Moses worked hard. So hard, in fact, that his father-in-law had to say, hey, slow up, Moses. You need to delegate your responsibilities here. You need to slow down and do only what you need to do. So Moses wasn't a man to shy away from his responsibilities, but he listened to his father-in-law. And as much as we like to idolize Moses in our stories, he was a great man. I'm not trying to take down and say that Moses wasn't a great man, but he still failed. He still had shortcomings. He still sinned in his life. But God still works through him. God still chose to use a broken instrument. Now this should give us hope, unless you all are perfect and I'm the only one here. But it gives me hope because I can see that God is willing to use somebody who's broken, who's messed up, who's failed. However, there still were consequences for Moses. Just because God used Moses doesn't mean that he didn't have to face the consequences of his sin. At the time when Moses failed, the Israelites were once again complaining. Now they've been wandering around in the desert again, and they get thirsty, and their livestock's thirsty. So they beg Moses to ask God to send water again. And that's where we pick up the story in Numbers chapter 20, verse number 6. Moses and Aaron went from the assembly to the entrance to the tent of meeting, and fell face down. And the glory of the Lord appeared to them. The Lord said to Moses, take the staff, you and your brother Aaron, gather the assembly together. Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community, so they and their livestock can drink. So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, just as he had commanded him. He and Aaron gathered the assembly in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock? Then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not hurt this community into the land I give them. Even after Moses had been in a relationship with God for years, and this is probably decades at this point, in a moment of frustration and anger, he chose to do things his way instead of listening to what God had told him. Moses chose to be the foolish man in our parable, and it cost him from entering into the promised land. What a sobering reminder that should be for all of us.
Amen.
That no matter how long we've been following God, we can so quickly, fall back into foolish ways.
That's true.
If we're not watchful and careful. It takes a daily refreshing of our faith to stay off the foolish paths. But not only that, it takes acting in accordance with our faith every second of the day. It takes both. Remind your neighbor, it takes both faith and action. By unifying your faith and actions, you will positively impact the life of those around you. When we as the church unify our faith and our actions, our community will change for the better. People who doubt will have no choice but to admit that there is something better about following Jesus. Unifying our faith and our actions will change the world, one small act at a time. Moses was used by God to change the course of human history because he had a relationship with God. He chose to listen to God, and then, for the most part, he chose to act in accordance with what God had said. By living this way, Moses delivered an entire nation out of slavery. And even though he fell short of perfectly unifying his faith and actions, but generations later, a God-man was born. And unlike Moses, he lived a life of perfect unity between his faith and actions. He lived a life in perfect unity with God the Father. He was born to deliver all nations from the consequences of sin, so all people could live a life in unity with God and living out their faith through their actions on a daily basis. This man, the God-man, Jesus, has delivered all, I said all, who put their faith in him and what he has done. By his perfect sacrifice on the cross, he has made a way to live in perfect unity with God so that we are all able to know his will. The actions Jesus lived out on this earth are the examples we are to unite our faith and our actions to every single moment of our lives. By doing so, we will continue to transform the world. Church, I don't know about you, but I sure am thankful that Jesus united his faith and his actions.
Amen.
And as I close tonight and the worship team comes back up, I want all of us to ask God to open up our hearts and our eyes to the areas where we're not uniting our faith and our actions. Maybe for you, you're holding back in your finances. You say you trust God with everything, but if you're honest, you really don't trust God even with just 10% of your money. You hold that little bit back because you think that you know how to spend it better than God does. Or maybe it's with your time. Maybe you say that Jesus is Lord of my life all the time, but your schedule, it really doesn't say that at all. Or maybe for you it's a secret hidden sin. A failure so devastating, so embarrassing, so shameful that you believe that there's no way that anybody, let alone God, could forgive you for that. I'm here to tell you that that's a lie.
Amen.
Tonight is the night to unify our faith and our actions. God desires to use us to help build his kingdom. It's going to take work, hard work that probably isn't always fun and we don't necessarily feel like doing all the time. And it's going to take faith in Jesus and what he's done, and faith that God has what's best in mind for humanity. It takes both faith and action. God, thank you so much for your words tonight. Father, I pray that you open up our hearts and our minds to the areas that we don't have our faith and our actions unified to you. Father, it doesn't matter what we've done, but we can come to you and you will use us. Thank you so much for your words tonight. I pray that your Holy Spirit continues to move in our lives as we go out, God, as you send us out into our communities, God, to change the world of just one person this week.